Those live streaming is working.
Unmute their mics only. Everybody else is muted. Just
yeah, I think that's good.
Okay.
We run into background.
Okay.
If we run into background noise, we're live. All right, Debbie, you're up.
Well, thank you all for being here and in a very unusual situation with the COVID crisis, and appreciate, I mean, there are 3 of us board members that are joined by Zoom and social distance properly in the boardroom. We have 4 other board members and President Wilson. Who else is in the boardroom? Dr. Davenport?
Daryl Morrison and Sarah Cravens.
Thank you.
Together with Betty Wright.
So the meeting is called to order. And the very first item of business is to approve the minutes of the February 27th, 2020 Financial Committee and Board meeting. That's in our board packet, page 1 through 6. And that was the Finance Committee and Board meeting where our financial challenges were explained in detail to the Board of Governors. So I would need a motion to approve that.
So moved.
So moved or seconded.
Second. So motion is to approve the minutes of the February 27th, 2020 Finance Committee meetings. And all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes 7-0. The next item, and both of these are in section A in the board book, if anybody's following along. Second motion is to approve the minutes of the March 5th, 2020 special board meeting, where the board approved the state of financial emergency. I would need a motion to approve that.
So moved.
Thank you. Is there a second?
I'll second.
So Betsy, you have who seconded? Yes. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? That motion passes. Thank you. So in our board book, section B, there's a lot of very good reading material from many of our divisions, our athletics, communications, student affairs, university advancement, and financial planning administration. However, for this board meeting, we're just going to hear from Provost Dr. Douglas Davenport, and he wants to, I believe, speak to us regarding how we responded as a university to the COVID-19 crisis.
Thank you, members of the board and those who are joining us virtually. And I would like to direct my comments today to how we have responded as a campus to COVID-19. But I would hasten to add that my remarks are relatively brief and much can be discussed beyond what I will say. And I would direct you to other vice president and member of cabinet's responses in terms of the board book that outlines a number of things that we have done as a campus. I do want to focus first and foremost on academics and how we responded, because as you know, the ability for an institution of our size and complexity, particularly with regard to higher ed, to pivot in a very short period of time is extremely challenging. And my hat is off to the members of our campus community, faculty, staff, and administration for taking on this challenge, and I believe doing a remarkable job. I would also say that what we did was not only innovative, but also led the way compared to what other institutions around the country did, because many of them started out with one approach and found out as they moved forward that it was not tenable or they needed to make changes. And as we did this, we approached this with the idea of how can we continue to serve students and at the same time maintain the integrity of the academic enterprise. And as you know, the integrity of that educational experience is crucial because we are awarding degrees. We are signaling to the world that our graduates are prepared. And so we took that seriously, that we must respond in a way that met both of those obligations. And so I'm very pleased with what we did. As you know, we determined that we would use an alternative delivery format for all of our courses. And that involved a lot of different options, but most importantly, we gave faculty some choices. And I think that was crucial, to give faculty choice. And that involved the idea of providing a culminating experience, which could involve any number of things or a set of things. And that could be assignments, papers, tests, et cetera, et cetera. Now, faculty were then allowed to choose whether their course was actually appropriately designed to use a culminating experience, but they were not required to do so if it was not that way. But beyond that, we wanted every single course to have what we refer to as an information bridge. So all content that the students would have gotten had we retained the regular semester was then provided through our learning management system, Canvas. So those were two pieces of that. The third piece, which I think was also particularly unique in our case, was the idea of grading options. And so in many cases, we essentially have letter grades or a student can withdraw. That's pretty much it. We also have what is an incomplete, where for certain reasons, very limited reasons, a student would be able to say, I need to take an incomplete. All three of those options were on the table for this semester, but what we did was to add an option for every course where it was a credit option, which meant that the student could, in looking at their midterm grade, could say, you know what, I believe that since I'm passing this course, I've got a C or better, I would like to take a credit option. So that proved to be an important piece of our response, because as it turned out, 48% of our students selected to take a credit option for one or more of their classes. In fact, 56 of our courses at the undergraduate level and 21% of graduate courses had at least one student selecting the credit option. So I think that's indicative of the students' desire to make sure that they could address their family needs, their personal needs, and still maintain their academic enterprise. And so I was very pleased to see that. I want to say also just a shout out to our registrar's office, where they processed over 4,200 requests for the CR or credit option. It's an amazing thing that they had to do. And that was a manual process. There's no way to automate it. So my hat is off to them. And I think that's indicative of what I saw all across our campus. And so there's a lot of very innovative and creative solutions. And I have identified a number of that I've highlighted in my portion of the report from different departments in art, biology, chemistry, School of Nursing and Health Professions. Even the way our library handled it was I think, very innovative and creative. And that was the order of the day. How can we be flexible? How can we be creative? And how can we serve our students? And as a campus, we've responded remarkably well. Now, one of the events that we normally at this point would be inviting you to, of course, attend and giving you an update about would be commencement. And of course, this year, we will not have the normal May commencement on Saturday. Instead, we will have our commencement in September on September 20th, which is a Sunday during family weekend, which means that we will still have an opportunity for any student who is graduating in the spring or summer to take advantage of that opportunity. And this spring, we would have, and we will have, in terms of the numbers of students graduating, we have 49 students who are graduate students who are either in the spring or summer. And we have 381 undergraduates for the spring and 72 for the the summer. So those numbers are fairly comparable to what we've seen recently. And we're hopeful that many of them will select the option of attending the rescheduled commencement. The other part of this that I thought was very innovative was we wound up with a number of celebrations that happened on our campus. And part of that, we mailed essentially what we're calling care packages, which included the cap and the gown and diploma covers to every one of our graduates last week. We had a packing party in Popwell, socially distanced, I believe, but a number of employees from all across essentially took one part of a day and loaded up and got those ready to mail out. So that gives our graduates their mementos. They can celebrate with their families and be prepared to join us in September. Beyond that, a number of virtual celebrations, some of which have not even occurred yet, such as the International Sash Ceremony and Farewell that we do for our international students. That is happening virtually. Our social work faculty are also hosting an event because they are never one to leave off an opportunity to celebrate. And so there are a lot of other examples that I could point to, but I will say that in the midst of the significant concerns that have been raised and the challenges that the COVID-19 crisis has created, not just for us, but for everyone, I'm very proud of the way we as a campus community have responded, and our students have appreciated it. That it has not been without some complications, because anytime you have as many options as we had, it does create questions. But by and large, I believe we have addressed them, and the semester has gone as well as one could have expected given all of those complications. So much more could be said with regard to our campus, but I do know that we want to move forward with the agenda. So I'm happy to answer questions at this time if anyone has them.
Does anybody have any questions, comments? I might just ask, what kind of issues, I'm sure you did you run into with students or perhaps who didn't have access to computers, laptops, internet access?
Well, that was one of the problems that we knew we would face, and that was one of the reasons why we wanted to provide options for the students, so that if they got home and did not have appropriate internet access or didn't have an appropriate computer, that they would not be forced then to essentially withdraw from their class if they didn't wish to. And so that was one of the things that we did. Now, we do not know how many students actually had the issue, but our spring semester end of term course evaluation, which we have just mounted, actually has a number of questions related to the challenges the students faced and how their experience went. So we're going to have more systematic data to look back on, especially as we're planning for the fall semester. We're going to need to know that so that we can be adequately prepared. So I don't have data for you, but anecdotally, I think there were a number of those challenges that existed, but far fewer than perhaps I might have guessed we could have had.
When do you suppose that data will come in, and will you need to have that for summer online?
For summer, because we know that students are electing to sign up for those, we would presume that they have the ability. So as opposed to what happened for us in the spring, where we essentially were required to do that.
One of the challenges that we have, in addition to the internet access, also is a number of our courses use sophisticated software packages, computers that are more sophisticated as well. And so that's part of the response, which was very flexible so that the professors could work around that. To your point, one of the things that we're looking at right now is, in the summer we'll be online, but we're starting to make preparations for the fall and looking at different types of models that we might use for the fall. So stay tuned as we, speak with our faculty and administrators and our students about the fall.
Well, you've all done a fabulous job, everyone. I mean, nobody could have ever run any kind of drills for a pandemic. So hats off to everybody on campus, faculty and administration, and our students. So, or any other comments or questions from board members?
I just like to make the comment to Dr. Davenport individually, but collectively to your team and faculty and staff for taking that lead step for commencement in the fall. That with all the things going on, sometimes it's easy to lose sight of things, and the easy decision would have been just to have moved past that, but to take the initiative and be a leader in our university doing that. Heard a lot of feedback. We've all heard lots of feedback in recent time, but heard a lot of positive feedback from families, students that I know, but even probably more significantly, parents and extended families of graduates, and the milestone recognition that is, and we are all in agreement that we are about our students, and to be able to be creative to come up with something very significant to recognize that achievement and celebrate those accomplishments. There are a lot of appreciative people out there, and I'm appreciative that our administration, faculty and staff has rallied around making that happen for our students. So thank you so much for taking the lead on that.
Well, on behalf of the team that put together a lot of ideas that ultimately culminated in what we wound up with, I say you're welcome.
Thank you so much. Your other board reports are in the packet. Does anybody have any specific questions or comments for any of those? A lot of good information, and you can see that everybody's done their very best to help our students. And I mean, that's what we're best at, is putting students first. Any other questions or comments? Then we will move on to Vice President Daryl Morrison for the financial report. Good afternoon, Daryl.
Good afternoon. Good afternoon, everyone.
I would say that's in section C.
It is in section. We have a brief report that's in section B, but we'll get right to the financial portion of this. I've got a PowerPoint this afternoon. Inside your the board book, there are some financial statements. I'll reference through some of those hurriedly as we go through several things. I want to make a comment before I begin and say that, as you're all aware, this has been challenging times for the university from a financial standpoint. There's absolutely no doubt about it. And we've all endured something. And one of the things that I want to say to the board is that through this process that has been outlaid, and as I go through additional reports today, there's one thing that I'm trying to accomplish, and that is to be open, honest, and transparent with what we're presenting. Nothing more, nothing less. Just to call a spade, as they say. So that's what we'll be doing today, okay? Or attempting to do. The first thing here is I want to begin with the current budget. Dr. Davenport would take care of that for me, but he chose not to. Okay, the current budget report. Here you see this, and when we talk about what I was referring to earlier, folks, these are the budget changes that we have seen this fiscal year. And we'll talk more about this, but somewhat of a roller coaster for us. Originally, when we came on board, we're column 1 there. Column 2 is revision 1, where we came back to the board after we discovered that there were some things that were not budgeted. Column 2, revision 2, is what we came back to the board with in February after making some adjustments and trying to tighten our belt. And then again, we've made another proposed change for this body today in the current revised numbers. And you'll see in all of this at the bottom, from revision 2 to now on the revenue side is only 4.2 in operating revenues, okay? However, you'll notice that from where we started the year at 47.3 to 50.5 in total on the revenue side. The next slide shows us where we're at on the operating expenses. It shows some $5 million over the years we've added in and made adjustments and things. And relative to what the expense budget was back in February, when the last one was presented, it's relatively unchanged on that front. However, we have multiple changes here. And if you'll note, line 1, state appropriations, we are down 1.798, almost $1.8 million for the year. That's based on the cut from the governor's office, where we'll take 1/12 of our state appropriation will be reduced for this current year. And they'll do that 600,000, roughly 600,000 per month over the last quarter of the fiscal year. And then as you go down through there, we have made some adjustments and some cuts in order to try to offset that. And so the bottom line here is that with the 1.8 million that the state cut us from, we have made some emergency cuts at this point in time. And I'll talk about these more in detail in order to get us to some solid footing, but we are still 2.6 down for the year. Okay. Look at our total revised budget for the year. If you look at the different fund types that we have here, this just backs up, and this is all in your board book. Here's the total revised, and I'm going through this quite hurriedly, but again, it comes back to the 2.6 is what we're projecting at this point in time, given the things that we know for this current fiscal year. Okay. The next slide shows us the revised budget to the actual. It gives us a snapshot of how we're running. You can see we're at 99% of our student tuition and fees, which is good. It's where we should be. If you'll notice, our housing number, though, is at 89%. Part of that is due to a refund that we had to issue, or credits that we had to issue to our students due to COVID-19 when they were unable to complete living on campus for the remainder of the semester. So that's a portion of that. The bookstore revenues we should be receiving shortly, so that will bring that number up again. The food service line is also another line that is down and under budget on the revenue side due to the early withdrawal or move from campus of campus residents. Salaries and compensation as we go into the last quarter, we're right about where we should be on those things, slightly under on fringes. Supplies and services, travel, utilities are running a little behind what we projected, but that's a good thing. That's a good thing. That is due to us changing some set points, doing a few minor tweaks on things on campus. Okay. And here we go as we look through the remainder of the changes, okay? This brings us back to the 2.6 projected. We're at 8.7 now in real dollars, up for the year with almost 3 months left to book. So that's where we're at, okay?
So can I ask a quick question?
You may.
So a year ago, when the budget was presented to this board, it was a balanced budget. I mean, we weren't planning on deficit spending one dime.
That's correct.
Cash over the last 3 years was 11.1, 11.2, 9.7. I mean, that's what our cash position had been over the last 3 years with a balanced budget presented about a year ago. Would that be a true statement? I mean, that's what we had.
Total cash, yes. I
Well,
have to look back at the audit
I picked it
report.
right off the financial statement.
Sure.
Right. So if the budget was accurate, that we passed, that was
Yes.
presented to us a year ago, what would we expect to end this year with if we started with 9.7?
You're asking me to propose and assume that something was accurate that was not accurate.
Well, okay.
I mean,
Well, but my point is, if it's a zero balance budget, would we not have ended with about $10 million?
would you have ended last year with $10 million?
No. They're
This
all-
year?
6/30/19, we
Yes.
started the year with almost 10, 9.7 per the financials. All I'm
Okay.
saying is this board voted, if I'm correct, on a balanced budget. And we're sitting here today,
Mhm.
if it was all perfect, if that budget was perfect,
Right.
and I'm not saying that it is, it's
Okay.
if it was, we'd be sitting here with about $10 million at the end of this year.
That'd probably be correct.
Okay, that's all I'm really.
Oh, that'd be correct.
That's a correct statement.
That
because
is, I understand what you're saying.
I went
Yes.
back and looked at our cash balance from 16, 17, 18, 19, just to kind of think to myself, when did this really start? You know, when did it really? And my observation of looking at cash was it declined from 16 to 17 primarily due to Spratt Stadium and the pool. It was right in the financials. It says it, I mean, that's where we spent a few $1 million on the shiny new objects. Then it stayed relatively consistent, other than a few operating expenses that were a little higher in last fiscal year. So really I guess where my point of saying all this is, I came to the conclusion after kind of reevaluating where we've been and where we're at, is cash has been maintained fairly consistent with the one decline, which is explained. And we were presented a balanced budget, okay? And when we handed off the reins to the new administration, we thought we had a balanced budget as a board. So is the current financial crisis that we're talking about right now, that we're excited about, which we have to act upon because of what happens in the current year? Because it to me, I mean, there's been a lot of finger pointed that said it's happened in previous years. And what I'm saying is, you know, we would be sitting here with about $10 million in the bank if the budget was correct. So it sounds like
I
to
was
me
going to
it's
say,
a
let me jump in.
No.
Because maybe I am misunderstanding. The problem that we have right now has not happened this year. It absolutely hasn't. So if you want to go back and look, I mean, you're talking about a certain point in time, which is June. If I go back to the board minutes in 2018 in December, and I'm looking at the cash position, it's $20 million in 2018 or 2016. It's $15 million, a decrease of $4 million in 2017. 2018, now it's down to 13 million. So if you talk about what's happening and going forward, now we're in July of 2019, right? July is down to 6.6 million, and we don't have the cash that's there as well.
I'm not arguing that
But the way that it's sounding is you're saying it happened this year.
well,
When it didn't.
I have a point. I'd like to say that in that cash balance you're looking at, there was an infusion of $3.8 million for a bond issue.
okay.
That also offsets that. But that's not operating cash.
Okay, I simply took the financial statements as audited to look at the cash balance over the last 4 years.
And I'm going to present something. on
Okay,
that
and
as
that's
well.
all I did. I just looked at the cash balance, took it right off the audit financial statements. They listed, and if
Right.
there's been a decline in cash, they explain why. There was never really an increase in cash per se. There was a
Right.
decline from 16 to 17, and it talked about Spratt, and it talked about Eagleton, is what it talked about. So I'm coming back just though to my original statement that we started the year. What I'm trying to say is this year's budget was really wrong.
Oh, there's no question.
So we didn't have that much to start with the beginning of the year anyway, which was 9.7 million according to the books.
And then in July, to my point, that's the low point, and we had 6.6.
Okay.
Because you're
I
spending.
understand
and
it
not bringing
goes,
to
I
us
understand
again,
the
right?
cash goes like that. I get that. But having said that, it seems like to me, just from a very simplistic, looking at the audited financial statements, not looking at monthly or daily numbers, that the cash maintained relatively consistent with a small decline in last fiscal year, and we've had a balanced budget. All I'm trying to make the point is our budget this year has caused super big problems.
Well, and my point is, it's not the budget this year, it's the previous budgets that weren't done correctly. Because as we came in as a new team and we're looking at, okay, why has the university lost $3 million a year for the last 3 or 4 years, which was largely unknown to the campus community. As you see the drop that's going down, you have the student newspaper that reported the university's lost 11 or 12 million in the last 3 or 4 years. Nobody knew about that. It was a surprise to me. I go back and I look at the statements from December that were presented to the board by the previous administration. And as I'm looking through, I'm seeing a $6 million drop in cash, certainly not 35 million. We haven't lost 35 million in cash. We haven't lost 15 million in cash, right? I mean, but I'm seeing a drop of $6 million. And then I look, and this is what was presented to the board, and we have a schedule of funds that are invested at 13.2 million. And then I turn the page and I'm looking at operating reserves, 10.2 million. And then I'm looking at the next page, which is another operating reserves of 5.2. The way that it looks to me, as I'm looking at this, is we have $30 million in cash in the bank, and that wasn't the case. And as we came in, and as we're looking forward to try and make sure that the university is preserved and survives, we're looking at this and we do an analysis because we're coming in and we're seeing an ailing patient. We're making the diagnosis and the analysis. And as we look at what the budget is reflected versus what's being spent, that was what we came to the board with in October.
I agree.
With an adjustment of, okay, the budgeting process is off by about $3.2 million.
And I agree with that. And once again, I'm not going to argue points with you with respect to cash. But I mean, I do have the footnotes of the financial statements as presented by the auditors of what our cash position was.
Oh, absolutely.
And
I'm looking at what was
But
presented to you.
but you would agree that not all cash is equal.
Okay, that's fine. But I'm just trying to I was trying to get the big
I
picture.
understand. That's
of
right.
When did this decline start? And when I look at what's going on, where we thought we were sitting here a year ago relative to where we are today, a lot of it has to do with the current year expenditures greater than revenues or revenues less than what we anticipate, or whatever you want to call it.
And a big to your point, I mean, a big chunk of it is scholarships, right?
Okay.
One of the things that I think the general public doesn't realize is that, number one, in a world where you have a competitive, where you have fewer students, right? And you've got more universities and they're throwing scholarships after students. Those scholarships are unfunded, right? So they're unfunded, they're just discounts. And in essence, one of the things that has happened, to your point, when did this start? It's happened over the past several years, is you have fewer students that have come in, at least paying students. So that's number one. And we have spent more money trying to attract those students. So this year, our incoming freshman class was down by 10%, right? That was what we discovered in August. Overall, it was down by 5%, but scholarships were up. And Daryl's numbers, I think, showed that scholarship money was up. And so what we have had to do is go and trim expenses this year. We probably trimmed $3 or $4 million off of expenses to make up for the discounts that we gave to students that are there. So you've got all of these different balls that are out there that are floating around that have really been hitting the university from different angles over the last 4 to 5 years. At the end of the day, we have limited cash, which I think Daryl's going to talk about, where we are as well. But it really has been not one thing. I know money has been spent on the stadium and it's been spent, on the pool and different things like that. But it really has been a progressive trend that isn't inconsistent with what we've seen from other universities. And as you look at the cash, it depends on what point one of the things that I was just pointing out was you're looking at audited financials. I'm looking at what the administration presented to the board when you guys were
I
talking
understand.
about.
I just went back
budgeting
to
and
the audit
like. So-
financial statements, knowing that they were audited financial.
Oh, absolutely.
I didn't go
Absolutely.
back to board minutes. I just got audited statements,
But I
laid,
do-
laid them all out next to each other,
Mhm.
tracked the cash across over the years, and that's what I found.
Yeah, and I do think I think a distinction is wise in that what was presented to you versus the audited statements as well.
Well, I'll get off cash. I mean, we're here because cash is cash,
It
and we
is.
have to operate with cash.
Mhm.
And so, and that's why I went, my sights zeroed in on cash as to what the balance was, what the balance is, at least at the end of last fiscal year, when your group came in, what budget we were presented and passed, and where we thought we were. You know as well as I do, I thought, until you sounded the alarm to me, that we had you $9.7 million in the bank with a balanced budget.
Absolutely.
You know that as well as I
In
do.
fact, I thought we had even more because I thought we had money in reserves based
So,
on what was presented to the board back in October of
And
2018.
this really kind of backs up what I'm saying. I mean, we may have differences in cash and that kind of stuff, but what the financial statements show and what has happened to the cash balance over the last 4 years is right there. I mean, it's not numbers I'm coming up with on my own. So continue.
But
Sorry,
just-
I kind of
just
got off
with-
track.
Just with that, I mean,
Let-
enrollment is kind of drive, and we have the 10% drop. If we stay static or we have a 10% increase, things that we're hoping for, that change, I mean, those were things that were maybe inaccurately budgeted for, but it was certainly was part of the plan of why cuts weren't maybe made sooner is thought that enrollment, I mean, that is our cash resource in that regard. As students here and having 10% less, but yet still having the same operating expenses, we still have the same faculty, we still have the same everything waiting for those students that weren't there for one reason or the other.
Yeah, I mean, there's no question about that. And you throw the scholarships on top of it that I was talking about. I mean, it's really an inexact science, but there was a miss. I mean, there was a miss in terms of, okay, how many students are going to be coming in, but even more so, how much are we going to be discounting? Because that's money in the bank going back to the cash that we wouldn't have gotten. So that's, those are another two of those balls that are floating around that have been hitting up against.
Something that confuses me too, as we talk about our enrollment being down, and if you take just someone off the street and they look at our revised budget across the, our revenues aren't budgeted down, and it's got to be all because of the scholarship quote now showing as an expense. Is that the
That's
why?
right. It will wind up on the financial statements, as you know, a
Through the-
net.
Okay,
an
that's what I'm saying.
allowance.
Is
That's
that the why to it? Because the person that picks this up goes, well, what do you mean enrollment's down?
Well,
I mean, the top line.
But
is
we've
not
also made
down.
adjustments, but keep in mind that there were adjustments made, and you also picked up revenues on there when we made the adjustment back in September, Dave, where
Okay.
the revenues that were not budgeted.
Okay,
And-
that's
and-
fine.
and-
That's fine.
We had to hold it apart.
Well,
Just-
and to your point too, on the
Yeah.
enrollment side, I think it's important to also emphasize what was presented to the board in terms of enrollment, because we've been talking about head count. So really until, I came in with my team, we hadn't done a deep dive, and I say we, the university hadn't done a deep dive in the number of high school students you have, versus your full-time undergraduate students that we have been talking about. And so, you go out online where, everybody's talking about, well, look at Missouri Western's, enrollment. And it's reported at, 5,500, some people, or 6,000 or something like that. I mean, the reality of the situation is in the spring, we had 3,800 students. In the fall, we had 4,200 students, right? And people are like, well, why in the world do you have 5,500 students that are being reported? Well, you have some students that graduate, you have some that'll fade away, you'll have others that come in. So it really is any student who enrolled in a class here on our campus, and not all students are equal, because some of them have scholarships. We also count, just like every other university in the state, high school students. And those high school students are taking classes in their high school, paying $93 per credit. We're paying for their textbooks. And so they get counted in our head count, making us look even bigger than we are. And they are our students, and we'll claim them. And we do a great job educating them in the dual credit, dual enrollment. But at the same time, they're not bringing us in the revenue that we otherwise would have. So you've got all these factors that are there. And what we have tried to do, and this is what we presented the board, was an in-depth dive and analysis of, okay, this is what we're seeing. This is why we're seeing a decrease in what's going on. So.
I mean, I could sit here and make a lot of comments, but about what I would consider past practices, in my opinion. Okay. I've been doing this a few days, and in my opinion, I will tell you without a shadow of a doubt that I'm the first vice president that has ever entered in a revenue budget on this campus. And I am the first vice president that's ever put budgets on the system, our accounting system, for funds in a lot of cases. I can come in here and give you a balanced budget. Anyone can.
Apparently I understand that.
And that's exactly what was happening. Okay. My goal this afternoon is not to be argumentative. It's not to be, as I said, it's to be transparent,
Well,
present the information, and to try to correct this moving forward. That's
Daryl,
what I'm.
My
And I
goal is
understand.
not to be argumentative. My goal is to have total transparency of what's
understand.
going on.
Right.
Because there's a lot of misinformation as to what's happened
Yeah.
and why it's happened.
I understand.
And there's a lot of that information that I don't like, because
I
I take
get
my
it.
job serious here.
Sure.
I care about people's careers. I know we all do. So, I mean, it's serious business to me, and that's why I care about it. That's why I went back to try to figure it out on my own, because you can read all the bullet points and you can do all that. And I'm not here to be argumentative or point fingers. I'm just trying to get clarity.
I understand.
That's all, just
I
clarity.
understand.
Well, and I think just kind of piggybacking on Dave, that we all understand the seriousness and we appreciate the deep dive into the records and getting us information. But there is also, when things are discussed through, the limited number of characters that can be on social media and things of that nature, bullet points tend to take over.
Yeah.
And there is some misconception that we've lost $35 million in cash. And we haven't.
That's correct.
Nobody has done that.
That's correct.
We have a financial situation that absolutely needs to be addressed with seriousness here, and to do some things that no one in this room wants to do, but we take our job seriously and know we have to do. But we all do need to be on the same page of knowing where everybody fits within the equation here. And we ultimately make the decision on what we're going to do going forward with that, and respect and appreciate the information coming in. But, throwing anybody under the bus, if there's times for accountability, that can all be addressed. But we need to talk about what is our financial situation.
Correct.
Right now, what we need to do to address that. Then we will also address what we're going to do going forward, because we absolutely have to have the public confidence in what we're doing. We should demand nothing less than that. I mean, all of us take this job very seriously, and we live in the communities and are all stakeholders here. And it does bother us that this is where we're at. But we just also need to address what really are the facts, and not, the sensationalism that has gotten out there too, because we are dealing with real issues here. And that's what I'm just saying is no one lost $35 million in cash. Nobody spent that on pet projects. Nobody has given themselves bonuses or stipends or other things that tend to get lumped around in here. Hindsight is what it is. If the state appropriated like they have historically, we wouldn't have to talk about a lot of these things. If enrollment, just trends, great that the economy was what it was before the COVID-19 situation is, but that meant fewer kids coming to school with what our state mandated mission is as open access and applied learning. We take that serious, and that also puts certain restraints, on there, and affects what our revenue is. And so I just wanted to bring us all, back together. I know we all
Oh, yeah.
take this very, very seriously.
I'm not pointing fingers.
I know you're not, and none of us are. It's just that we have lived and breathed this for a long time, and that's, and I am happy that the public has cared enough to blow my ear up, and I'm sure every other board members with that, and I appreciate that because people care. That's what this is about. Apathy is the worst thing that we could have with that. But just, I wanted to try and get the wheels back on the track. I may have slid off a little bit with that.
You have a question? Okay. Yep. Al.
I've been on this board 1 year. Hindsight's 2020. As we look backwards, we're going to find things that should have been. In history. But for us, to the point that we go back and look, is where we don't repeat the things we did wrong. That's what we're here for today.
Right. Thank you. Back to, I don't even know whose comment it was now, right?
Read that back, Betsy.
To the limited numbers of characters, okay, that are in social media oftentimes.
That was Lee's.
It was, and then to the misunderstanding and misconceptions about net position that are out there. I think that's
Exactly. That's it. That's what people don't understand.
so I'm going to attempt to help people understand. Let me be open, honest, and truthful as I try to be always. We did not lose $35 million in cash. That did not happen. Our net position as presented on financial statements did go down 35 million. Here's the chart. This is all from the audited financial statements with the exception of FY20, which is a projected number done by yours truly on where we're at and how we're trending right now. But that's it. So what are the elements of net position? Here they are. You start with your capital assets. You take your bonds and long-term debt, your depreciation on those assets to bring you down to a net investment in capital number. This will tie up on any financial statement that you look at on the balance sheet of net investment. There are also in those numbers, Governmental Accounting Standards Board principles. 68 and 75 are the pronouncements in question this afternoon, and they deal with pension liabilities and OPEB. That is a statement that GASB adopted from FASB in about 2014, 15, in that range, okay? It's about the time that all these large corporations quit taking parachute plans because there was a limit and they had to start showing it on their balance sheet as such in that liability. I don't know if you'll recall some of those things, but that's what happened. GASB adopted that same rule. We have gone in our net position decrease from 29 to 59 just for that pension amount, okay? So that is a large portion of the $35 million. What we need to concern ourselves with and the things that we can control as a university are the next two lines, the restricted lines and the unrestricted operating. And from a net position, assets minus liabilities, we went from $13 million to 2.8 is what I'm projecting at the end of this fiscal year. And we can talk about a lot of things, But that's really the decrease, $10 million in the operating side, and then another whatever.
Where is depreciation expense booked into this?
It's in the depreciation right there.
Is that depreciation expense or accumulated?
That's cumulative.
Okay,
But of
where's-
course, you're taking into account your capital asset
I
at a
understand.
cumulative number as well.
I understand that, but do we have depreciation expense in any of these numbers that
No.
you're presenting in the bottom?
No,
Expense is not there.
not depreciation expense. It's included with the depreciation.
Okay,
up
so
at
the
top.
expense is not in that number.
No, not the depreciation.
Okay, but depreciation itself has lowered the net capital investment account.
That's
or
correct.
Each by $20 million.
That's correct. And it would be part of the total
Total
35
loss,
million.
right. The 20
Right.
million or so is depreciation
That's right.
expense.
That's right.
And the other 16 million or so is GASB 6875.
That's right. It would be
Ballpark.
20, it would be 20 and then whatever the difference is, 32. Yeah.
Right. And I will
And then-
tell you that at 6/30/14, that GASB number was 0.
Yeah, that's right.
And then they made us book it, the entire amount of $29 million non-current liability in 6/30/15.
Okay.
And so it didn't change much between 15 and 16, and then it started going up.
So I just pulled this out, the net position on operating funds, because that's really what we're talking about here. And that's where we stand. Okay. Here's the cash and investments. We talked about that earlier. Okay. When we look at this, we can pull the numbers, but there's been a decrease in them over a period of time. Projecting at 6 at the end, that's all inclusive, 8, 6, 15. And that really doesn't seem that bad, except you lost almost $5 million of investments got converted in there as well. So when you look at the cash numbers on the financial statements, you have to take into account not only the cash numbers, but the investment numbers that were in there, because if you do not, so basically you're looking at 20 million to 6 million in cash dollars. Okay. And that's my concern. Okay. We look at cash and investments. I just want to throw this up to you again. It's all going to come back at 630 to that 6 million. If you'll see that, look at the number 6063 there. Let's come back here for 620. Now, here's the other part I want to show, is that in that 6 million of this, 5.1 is unrestricted. That's what we can operate on. The restricted cash are restricted for only certain types of purchases. We can't use that to operate the university on in and of itself. You can't pay the president. You can't pay me. You can't pay the people running our sound and our video here, okay, with those restricted funds, okay? So as you look at this number, it's 5.1 and 958, okay, for 6,063,000 at the end of 630. But look at the projection here for 731, which is our low point. We've talked about this before, is 3.6 million. Now, I've made that assumption based on what I know today, okay? And what I know today is that I'm losing in the month of April, May, and June, $1.8 million in state funds. And I know that based on the information that's out there right now, I'm going to lose somewhere between 10 and 20% of state revenue for next year. And I also know that my student enrollment is going to be down, which has not even come into play yet because it's not the fall semester for those tuition fee dollars. Okay. Here's cash on hand. If you can look back at your old packet, you'll see that because of the adjustments and the things that have happened, we are gone down to 21 days in July of days of cash on hand. Okay. You can see where we were in 16, real numbers, okay? From 83 to 34 to 19, those are real numbers, down to 21 coming up. The other things that is asserted and that people don't understand oftentimes deals with accreditation on this university. We have certain issues and certain levels we have to meet in order to maintain accreditation, both academically and financially. And so what I want to do is take just a few minutes. I think it's this important as we talk about a shift potentially in some of our programs and offerings and things that we do, to know what our accreditors are looking at. The first thing, these are standard ratios out in the business world. I know Dave will be very familiar with these, okay? Primary reserve ratio takes your expendable net assets, divides it by your total expenses, you know. It measures the financial strength of your business or entity, okay? The recommendation is 0.4. In 17, we were at negative 2.8. We're currently at audited financial information, negative 0.53. And the average is 0.4.
The average or
Positive.
recommended or average?
Average, recommended.
Okay.
Average.
Recommended. I mean, average, I would say average compared to who?
Recommended
Yeah,
is
recommended.
0.4.
Okay,
Yeah, positive 0.4.
I understand.
Right. Okay, that's primary reserve. Here we go, net operating ratio is changing your unrestricted net assets. Supposed to be a 2 to 4% return. Okay, that's a recommended goal. Okay, what are we? Negative 0.19, negative 1.6, negative 1.6 again. Okay. Return on net assets, 3 to 4% return. Once again, we're in the negatives, going down, 0.1, 0.2, 0.29. Liability ratio, okay. What is that ratio? Expendable net assets, the amount of debt you've got. Here we are, went from 0.4 to 0.8 last year.
Who are you, the recommendation, who's, I mean, be positive, that's a given. So
That's the accrediting body.
accrediting body, okay, I missed who you
Yes,
said.
I'm sorry. North Central. That's our recommendation. Okay. And this is really I hear this, a CFI. It's North Central, Higher Learning Commission of the North Central Association. Not anymore. Not anymore. I'm old. Okay. All right. So the Composite Financial Index here, the CFI, is where you take all these ratios, you add them up to reach a CFI, okay? And the goal of this, and this is what all the accrediting bodies want to know, what is your CFI? And they tell you, this is their chart, right? 1 to 1 is assess your viability to survive if you're in that range. 0 to 3, you need to re-engineer and change some things. And you can see this, okay? Here we go. We're at a -3. There's not even a place on the scale for where we're at. If there's anything that drives home a financial emergency, this ratio does. I'm not trying to scare anybody or bore anybody with feeding you these ratios because they get kind of, I'm doing it to try to express where we're actually at so that everybody understands. Okay. Okay.
And just one note there.
Yes.
In my remarks, I'll talk a little bit more about accreditation and our conversations with the accreditors as well.
Okay. Budget, financial ups and downs. Here we go. Back on our back, we went from down 318. What did we do? Well, we budgeted previously unbudgeted funds. That's what we did in that time, right? Restricted, grant, plant. Picked up about 3.5 in revenues, 17 million in expenses, net operating, expenses, and that's like some liabilities, 10, that brought us to that 3.1. That's what we did, rehash a little bit here. And then we bumped it up in January, right, to 729,000. What did we do? We began to make adjustments after we got that initial budget in place. We went out, okay? Matt went and did a presentation to the foundation board, made a proposal. They kicked in an additional $750,000. We did a restructure on campus, a reduction in force that got us about $1 million. But as you may recall, we also had an HVAC unit several HVAC units go out in Remington, Agustin that we had to replace. We also turned over a rock over in my office and found that our bond payments were $560,000 more than we had anticipated and had been in that original budget. We tried to trim budgets best we could at that time at $150,000. And then we ran out of buckets to put around in Wilson Hall to catch the water when the roof was leaking every time it rained. So we've got to put a roof on. So we budgeted for that out of necessity. So we thought we were on the road to recovery. Well, you see, here we are in April, we've got 174 again, the wrong direction. What did the state do? 1.8. What have we done in response? We moved from a hiring frost to a hard freeze on hiring on campus. We suspended every P card on this campus. Every expenditure has to have one of two people's approval, myself or the president. We did a freeze on expenses, supplies, travel. COVID kind of took care of the travel for us, but that's it. And we went in and slashed budgets never seen before on this campus to the tune of $1 million, trying to offset that in the late stages of a year. What does the future hold as I wrap up? It's not looking good. But I would be remiss this afternoon not to leave you with this to think about, because it's a reality of what we are post-COVID as we're still coming out of that. Right now, the state's looking at somewhere between, as I mentioned earlier, 10 to 20%. Most of the, quote, experts on this are leaning more towards the 20% reduction as opposed to the 10. And I'm not sure if you're going to talk about that more, so I'll leave that to you. Tuition and fees, we do 80% will be good. Most people will tell you they're budgeting next year at a 75% level. And that has a domino effect to your housing and your other auxiliary, your food service, your bookstore, athletics, all these other things that come into play. So that's just the revenue side. Well, if you have less students, then you're going to have some scholarship savings. And we were already looking at some scholarship savings with our new scholarship program, okay? But our auxiliary operations will also have a reduction there. And then the proposed cuts of 3/4 that we'll try to take out of that. And that's something y'all will be discussing potentially today. Not potentially, you will be talking about it today in a meeting. But it's a 3-year plan. The first year will get us roughly that amount of money, okay, on what you're talking about. So the last bullet point down there is simply this: what's next? I'm not sure. We've got to continue to look for better efficiencies, better ways of doing things. And we also have to look at better ways to attract students. to our campus once things open back up, because that's what it's going to take to turn this around. Okay. So with that, any questions? Thank you.
Daryl, I would at least, point out that we had questions during your presentation,
Sure.
and maybe not asking lots now. That's not a lack of,
No.
These, I just want to be out there, on the record of the amount of briefing that, we have received from you and the administration. Of these reports have been coming to us that we have had for quite a while now, and looked over and have had lots of dialogue and individual questions back and forth from, I know, every board member, whether it's to you or the president or provost or whoever, with that. So just lack of all questions right here. A lot of those have been answered, and a lot of your reports are revisions based upon communication that you all have had in your disclosure and transparency to the board with what all this financial data is.
Okay. Thank you.
I would like to add that this board has never ever seen this level of detail and transparency. I've never seen it like this, and this is exactly what we need to see, and we're very appreciative of all the work that you do. I know you're in that office by yourself. You don't even have a controller or anybody else in there, and this is exactly what we need to see. We should have been seeing for years prior.
Thank you.
Anybody else? Thank you for everyone's questions and input, and to follow what Lee said. Yes, individual board members talk to Daryl Wilson, Daryl on the phone all the time. I was on the phone with him. He spent almost an hour with me on Saturday. I think he's talked to many other board members individually. Matt, President Wilson, the board will tell you, we get a lot of emails from him at 11 p.m. at night. He's working probably 20-hour days on this. And I can't tell you how many times I've told Matt how sorry I am that we brought him here thinking that he was signing up for something different. And we appreciate everything that you're doing. So with that, any other questions or comments? I would need a motion to approve the financial report as presented.
So moved.
Second.
Thank you. Is there a second?
Second.
Second from Kayla?
Yes.
Okay. All in favor to approve the financial report as presented, please vote by saying aye.
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 Any opposed? That motion passes. Thank you so much, Daryl. This is a level of detail that we have needed to see. I think there's President Wilson has a report that he would like to explain and go over with us and make some strategic recommendations. It is in the board packet. Is tab D. Just want to remind those in the public of the shared governance process that came about to these recommendations. These did not come from President Wilson on his own. It did not come from top down. It came from a neutral committee, academic review board. And then from there, it went to the provost. And then the provost opened it up for public comment, which I will say that we're very appreciative of all the comments that we heard from the public, both the good and the bad. We wanted to hear it all. Emails, the community, the faculty. And then, of course, provost did present his recommendations to campus, and it was open for comment, like I said. Then he sent his recommendations to President Wilson, and then President Wilson put a great deal of time into it, and then he made his recommendations, which are in the board book, tab D, to the board on April 24th. So, President Wilson,
Thank you.
all yours.
All right. Appreciate the opportunity to be here and to address the board. Debbie, thanks for those comments. One of the great things about coming here to Missouri Western has been the reception, the people here who are truly dear friends. And one of the things that Lee alluded to was that people do care. And so there's been a lot of discussion over the course of the last 6 weeks, and I appreciate those, particularly those who have weighed in a professional manner and provided us with their thoughts and with their insights, and really letting us know. So thank you for that. On the topic of gratitude, or the subject of gratitude, everyone who has stepped up during COVID-19. I again want to express my gratitude, and that starts with the students and their flexibility and their understanding, genuinely with the faculty and the staff whose lives have been disrupted in so many ways, both here in the workplace and at their home, the board, the community as well. And so, fortunately, as we sit here today, really at the end of our semester, even though it's been lonely here on campus, I really do want to express my gratitude. At the same time, want to express congratulations for all those who are graduating, and for everyone who along the way made a difference. One of the things that attracted me to Missouri Western was not only the belief, but the mission statement that every employee is an educator. And I've seen that with the board as I've talked with each member and how much they care about the students, about the community, about the university. This is a thankless job for them in many respects, one that they don't get paid for, one that they spend hours and hours serving the community for. So, to each one of you, Rick and Greg and Debbie and Lee and Kayla and all of you, Dave. Dave's at the top of the list. He got me here. Al as well. I think I got you all, and doing that too. So a lot of gratitude that's there as well. As we talk about trying to make an impact, one other thing is that hopefully as we wish congratulations to our students when we move forward, that we're able to continue to take care of the students. We not only say that, but we do that. We're trying to make sure that we've got a pathway for each one of them. And I'll talk about that today as well. One of the things, and we haven't talked publicly about it to any large degree, simply because we have not had the information that we need from the federal government, but there has been from the government as part of one of the stimulus packages, some monies that are made available to the university. And I've heard some people say, well, you're getting money from the federal government, so you don't have financial problems. Well, that's not correct in any stretch of the imagination. COVID-19 has impacted not only us, but the students as well. And so we have been informed that we should get about $3.6 million, $3.7 million, $3.7 million from the federal government. Half of that money we cannot apply to university operations, university losses, things that have done. That money, fortunately for our students, will be passed through directly to those students who are eligible for those funds. And so when we talk about the 3.7 million, half of that, we're just like a bank where we need to figure out the way to get it to those who are qualified for that. And that's not a determination on our end. That's a determination that the federal government has helped us make. So hopefully we will be able to do that. We have sent out an urgent call to students who never filed their FAFSA form if they're eligible to do that. So if I have any students listening or any faculty or staff who know of students who haven't filed a FAFSA, please do that by Friday, because we're at a juncture where we're just about at the point where we can access those funds from the federal government. We want to give that to our students to help them through this difficult time as quickly as we can. Once that is over, we will be able to draw some money from the federal government, about $1.8 million, I think $1.86 million, that will help us cover the losses that we have had over in the residence halls and the things that we have had that are COVID-19 related. We're still waiting on details for that. I want to emphasize, though, that will not make up for the money that we had taken back from the state. The state called up and said, we don't have sufficient income tax revenue or sales tax because everybody's staying home. And so we're not going to be able to give you 1/12 of your allocation for this budget year. And Daryl talked about that in his presentation. So here we think we're making inroads, we're saving money, we've done all this great thing. And then because of COVID-19, which is outside of our control, we've got to go and figure out what to do with the additional, $1.8 million, 1.86 million that we've lost from the state that's there as well. One of the things that keeps me up every night is getting another email from the state saying, well, we don't have any more money, we're going to pull back even more. And so, as I have weekly meetings with the Department of Higher Education, I do so with trepidation because I'm just waiting for us. I mean, we're all in a very, very difficult spot. Something that we wouldn't have imagined, a couple of months ago, but trying to make the best of it. And we'll kind of walk through that as well. The state budget, the state is meeting this week. They are talking about at least a 10% reduction to our appropriation. But again, that could change tomorrow. Even if they say negative 10%, if the taxes aren't coming through, then the state, they're mandated to balance their budget and they don't have money, then we may just not get that deposit that we otherwise would. So we'll continue to do that. We were very encouraged by a lot of the work that had gone on behind the scenes this last year, because when the House's original budget came up, we had an extra $1 million that had been added into Missouri Western State University's core appropriation. Other universities did not get that, with two other exceptions, but Missouri Western had an extra $1 million in for some of our innovative initiatives that had resonated in Jefferson City and elsewhere. Unfortunately, the state's not going to have that money, so it's not going to come through, but we were very encouraged by the reaction that we had gotten. It's one thing if you're advocating for the status quo just to stay as it is, if that status quo is working. But as we know, I mean, we need to constantly innovate. And if you do that, then you're able to move the train forward. And that's what I want to talk about today is moving the train forward and what we're going to do. So today, my report's going to be a little bit long. I know that's a shocker to a lot of folks, but as we move forward, I think that the time is appropriate to talk about my report and my recommendation to the board, and do so in three different respects. One, I want to talk about how we're at a crossroads to protect students and a crossroads at protecting Missouri Western. Secondly, the decisions that are the recommendations that I'm going to make to the board today, basing those largely on decisions that have already been made by the students, and really aligning our revenues with our expenses and vice versa. And then I want to talk a little bit about the hope and strategy, and some of this is going to be mixed on in. But if you think about crossroads, which is the first thing, I mean, higher education really is at a crossroads. And what is a crossroads? Crossroads is a point at which vital decisions must be made. And not only is Missouri Western at a crossroads, I think higher education in general is at a crossroads. And so what do we know? If we're talking about the point at which decisions are made, well, we know that higher education impacts individuals and families and communities. We know that higher education impacts businesses and jobs, factors into sustainability and competitiveness. It factors into our future. And we know that higher education changes the lives of students for the better. Study after study shows that college degrees, those that earn college degrees, they are statistically likely to earn $1 million more than their peers without a degree. We know that during downturns in the economy, which we're seeing right now, the likelihood of someone with a college degree and being unemployed is nearly half of that, or it's 2 times that of those that don't have degrees. Studies have shown that folks with college degrees live 7 years longer on average than those who don't. They vote more often, they volunteer, and they engage in civic life more often. So the value of higher education absolutely exists. But the question that is being asked across the United States right now is whether higher education is sustainable in its current form. Must it change? So let's talk a little bit about change and some of the challenging truths about higher education. Because when higher education in general, and this is just not Missouri Western, but this is really around the country, and even more so here in the Midwest, where we've seen downward student enrollment trends, strained state funding resources, rising costs, scholarship discounts that we talked about earlier. We have deferred maintenance needs. Our buildings need to be fixed, as Daryl talked about. We have long-term debt, and there are other factors that are out there as well. So how do you respond to these forces? Well, you know, when I came in as president, I knew that many of these things existed because they exist in higher ed across the country. Now, some of the challenges that we have are unique, but really not that unique because I think other universities are facing them as well. Were there things that we didn't talk about? Yes, we didn't talk about those. There are things that we need to talk about now and address in short order, but what we have been doing really over the last 9 months is, you know, responding to those strategically and proactively. Instead of waiting, we have been putting together plans, working together with the campus community, together with the board. And I want to thank the board for their willingness to work with us, to be strategic, to be innovative, and to move the train forward. Now, some would say, and I've heard it recently, that the way to respond to these forces is to just keep what you've always been doing, to do nothing, don't do anything, don't change. In fact, if you wake up tomorrow, the sun will rise and things will get better. Unfortunately, simply hoping that things will go away, disappear, or get better, that enrollments will jump, that is not going to happen. That's just not reality. Maybe back in the 1970s or the 1980s, that was the reality when you open the door to an institution of higher education and students would just run in your door and there was a lot of support from the state. We don't have that luxury anymore. In fact, higher education over the last decade really has been trying to move things forward. Some others would say, no, let's just nibble around the edges. Well, if you just nibble around the edges and you don't make the changes that are needed to really go out and not only survive, but thrive, there's really not any good that comes of that. You're just prolonging the inevitable. If there's no accountability, then you have issues that are going to crop up. We could make substantial adjustments. And you can do that with respect to expenses. And we've done a lot of that. And Daryl talked about that in a lot of detail. Another thing that you can do is you can align with your strengths. You can innovate and you can invest in certain areas that hopefully will help stabilize the university. So if you think about, you know, okay, these are the strategies, what are others doing? And every university's kind of taken a different approach. But I can tell you that these forces in higher education have led other universities in Missouri and universities around the country to reduce personnel and programs, something that we really haven't done here in earnest at Missouri Western. You can adjust your approaches, focus on new strengths. You can stop doing certain things. You can go out and you can innovate. But if you just stand pat and you do nothing, what happens is what we're seeing with a lot of institutions pre-COVID-19 in their closure or potentially in their merger. So I was spending some time chatting with our accreditors this week. I don't know what institution it was, but our gotten off the phone with somebody who that institution was completely out of cash, and their foundation down to the last dime they had borrowed against that. I don't think they're going to last very long. You can open up post COVID-19, and every day you can see other universities that are slashing hundreds, if not thousands of employees to try and adjust and align. Why? They're in panic mode. What we're doing is we're trying to be strategic and going forward. And we've done that for the last 9 months in terms of being strategic. Forces like this, they can defeat you, or they can cause you to innovate and to change in a way that is going to not only attract students, but it's going to help retain students. It's going to help you educate and elevate, and that's what we're here to do. We are at a point, we are at a crossroads where we need to innovate. We can create new career pathways. We can create new degrees. I would hope that we stand as examples to our students by innovating as opposed to stagnating. There are plenty who complain that we shouldn't do anything. We shouldn't do anything different. There shouldn't be winners and there shouldn't be losers. Well, I'll tell you, you need to be a winner to succeed in today's environment. If you don't, we might as well just close the doors. But I believe, and this is one of the reasons why I came here, is the folks at Missouri Western are capable of innovating. They're capable of changing, and they're capable of moving forward. Not everybody's going to understand, but we need to be able to go and do that, because the COVID-19 crisis has added a massive disruption to students, to university operations, and to finances as well. Universities with significantly more resources are making moves to survive. One university in the Midwest, they're going to lose $1 billion this year because of COVID-19. And even if you look around the state, what we're seeing is that is there. So absent change, universities may be no more. We're at a very, very critical point. So let's talk about Missouri Western in more detail, because here we put students first. One of the great things about Missouri Western is we're an open access institution. Another phenomenal thing, we've got a statewide applied learning mission. We're an invaluable resource for students, for families, for local communities. We're critical for attracting and retaining talent in our area, and we're vital to the success of local industry and society. Are we at a crossroads? Absolutely. It's here before COVID-19. It's been accelerated by COVID-19. And I would invite anybody who hasn't taken the time to read the report that I have put together to read it. It's on the Board of Governor website. Take the time, go beyond the headlines, and truly understand where we are. Missouri Western, our approach has been like other universities. The idea has been that more is more. Offer more degrees, more classes, more sections, more professors. We have been a regional comprehensive institution. Back in the 1970s and the 1980s, maybe in the 1990s, that was fine because you had the state support. You had a plentiful supply of students who would come in. But today you need to be more strategic, more laser focused, and you need to understand that being a comprehensive institution is simply too costly. You know, here at Missouri Western, we face challenges. Daryl talked about those challenges, and so I'm not going to go into those. But if you think about it, essentially what's happening is we have our revenue that's not keeping pace with our expenses. And we talked about why. As Dave and I talked about scholarships. We talked about discounts. We heard about higher costs that are out there. We talked about the reserves that we just don't have at this point in time. If you look at the building repairs that we have to do, if you look at the tuition discounts that we have given, it's required us to be creative, to slash expenses, to ask the foundation for more assistance that's there as well. Because at the end of the day, what we have seen is that our undergraduate students, our full-time students, the ones that pay our tuition and our fees that enable us to function, they've dropped 977 over the last 10 years, while our staffing levels and faculty have increased. We need to align our student body with our staffing levels, as difficult as that might be. So in sum, although we really provide a quality product and we do a lot of wonderful things, We have got to make sure that we are balanced. So should we simply do nothing, where students just wander in the door? Well, we can't do that. Should we just cut? Well, I don't think that you can necessarily do that as well. We need to align our expenses, but we need to go beyond that. So we need to be doing things new. We need to be taking different approaches. We need to make sure that here in St. Joseph that we're knocking on the door of every prospective student and telling them how great Missouri Western is and why they need to be here. Missouri Western should never be an afterthought. It should be the core and fabric of our community, and we need to make sure that that message gets out there because we have great programs. We have many programs and we have great programs that I'll talk about them as well. Now, when you do the new, I know that the complaints flow and people often don't understand how it works. I've tried to make myself available for conversations. I've been as transparent as I think anybody could be through town halls, through individual meetings, through conversations, but yet the misinformation continues to flow. So for those who have questions and want to talk, please know that my door is always open. Why? Because I care about the institution. Why? Because I want to see it succeed. Over the last 9 months, what has become clear is that time is of the essence, that we need to move and we need to go forward. What we have discovered is that there were well-intentioned strategies that simply not worked as we had hoped. We have had things that we have needed to do, but I'll tell you some of the things that we've done in the last 9 months to make a difference that have made it so instead of talking about our cash flow being to the point that it is, not being double or triple that to the negative side. We have eliminated senior leadership positions. We have not filled others. I have had conversations with senior leadership and administrators who I can see are thoroughly exhausted as they try and work on behalf of this institution. And I express my appreciation to them. The reason why they're thoroughly exhausted is because we have not hired people that they typically would need. We have asked people to take 2 or 3 jobs, if not more. Someone in this room has a title that probably is 3 lines long because we keep on asking her to pick up additional work for folks that we have not hired. We have fewer colleges. We have fewer staff positions. We've done freezes. We've done layoffs. We have done strategic hires, and some people have gone, why in the world would you be hiring people if things are bad? That doesn't make sense. Well, I'll tell you, the reason why you go and you hire and you do it strategically is because we need students here. I had somebody who took issue with the fact that we have somebody who is dedicated to military and veterans recruitment. Well, we want military and veterans on our campus. We want them to know about Missouri Western. And if we go without a hire like that, how do people find out about us? So we've invested in admissions, and we've done it in military and veterans. We've done it in our admissions crew. We've done it in international, and we have seen things working. Unfortunately, we need more time to get those to work. We've done strategic initiatives that we have not spent millions of dollars on. We certainly have not even spent hundreds of thousands of dollars on those. And the strategic initiatives that we've talked about over the course of the last month, they've made us distinctive. They've attracted attention to our university in a positive sense. And so those who will go out and those who will cast stones, talk to me about it, because I'll tell you, we have donors that have stepped up to help out. We have students that are coming to us along these lines, and we've done some really cool things. We shifted expenses onto the foundation. We've reduced operating budgets. We've asked athletics to chip in and to save money as well. They cut $400,000 out of their budget and their expenses this last year. We've done a new scholarship approach. We've got spending deferrals we put into place. We stopped doing things. For the first time in my life, I signed a lease that was $0. Fortunately, we were not leasing it, we were renting it. But it was a $150,000 lease that we were spending money on to educate students down in Kansas City. We had one of our alums and supporters step up and offer to rent a space for $0. It's contributors, it's being creative, it's being innovative that has helped keep us going so that we're not talking about closing our doors today. We're talking about the next steps. We're talking about where we can go and what we can do, because we have strategic solutions and we're moving as quickly as we can. We've stopped outsourcing our admissions. Why? We need to increase students and we need to bring that in. We need to have person to person, or I guess physically distant right now. Hopefully there'll be a time when we can do that. But we've reduced barriers for student retention. We're talking about new degrees. We're collaborating with school districts and community colleges. We have new initiatives. There are no pet projects that are on the table right now that are not going to bring in revenue. In fact, there's no pet projects. We're looking at ways to bring things in to help drive students that are here. And another thing that we have done with a lot of expertise in this room, people that have been in these fires before, people who maybe didn't sign up for the fire, but we found ourselves in that fire where we have gone through this, that we have done an exhaustive evaluation of everything else that's out there as well. In fact, as we talked about a state of financial emergency, I convened a finance advisory council who came together, and that represented not only the administration, but it also represented the academic side of the shop. We had faculty, we had a staff representative, we had a student. We talked about the finances, and everybody unanimously came to the same conclusion that we need to act. We need to act. We need to move forward, as difficult as it may be. And we've talked about everything from high to low to wide to far, and we've put out calls. We've had communications that have come in, and we will make it through this state of financial distress. But we've got to keep in mind, one, even though we've done a host of measures and we have made significant inroads, we need to do more. You saw the roller coaster that Daryl Morrison put up. That's what we've been dealing with. It's like 2 steps forward and 1 step back, and sometimes it's 1 step forward and it's 2 steps back. That is not unusual to us. That's part of operating a university, and we're making it work. Important number 2 is, we have a plan to preserve Missouri Western and to continue to serve our students. And 3 is keeping in mind what we're doing is based on data and it's based on facts. We're just not making things up. In fact, if you look at the Academic Review Board, this was a group of faculty and deans who were put in a room for literally a month just to look at the facts, just to look at data, to look and see, are we in line with what the state has recommended with respect to programs and program graduations? They were looking at sustainability. They were looking at what other universities are offering the same programs. They were looking at what academic pathways are out there as well. There was a comment made that if we cut this program, we're going to be one of the few that have the program. Well, isn't that the problem? If everybody is offering the exact same programs, where can you be distinctive to draw those students on in? We need to be able to be in a position where we're pitching to our strengths. The provost took those took the numbers, took the recommendations, and he took his best judgment and said, okay, let's look beyond the numbers. Instead of just having the objective, and there was some subjective that was in there with the Academic Review Board, but the provost did that and came back and said, okay, can we possibly keep 3 additional programs that weren't included in the Academic Review Board's report? He talked about chemistry. He talked about communication. He talked about music, all playing important roles, not only on our campus, but here in our community as well. At that point in time, we opened it up to the campus community. And I would like to commend those that chimed in, particularly those with creative solutions about what we might be able to do with reduced staffing levels to save even more courses, save even more programs that are there. And here, as we talk about a programmatic shift, we're not necessarily talking about never offering courses in a discipline that might be phased out. We will continue to offer those courses. We just won't offer a major or a degree. Why? Well, that's what the numbers show. In fact, we're talking today about programs in under 20 different areas, about 48 separate programs, and many of these are concentrations, right? When you see a list, you're like, oh my gosh, the university is proposing that it's going to phase out so many programs, when really, if you look, a lot of these are offshoots of a major. So in theater, for instance, you might have 3 different degrees, even though it's theater. And so we're looking at all of these things. But if you look at the degrees and the programs that the students have self-selected, And when I say that, the students are choosing what degrees that Missouri Western should offer. It's not Matt. It's not the members of the academic review board. And my appreciation goes off to the individuals that did that difficult task. The hours that they spent and the number of time that they spent, the things that they have been subjected to around the community, they were doing what is potentially going to help Missouri Western. But what they saw was, they saw out of the 48 programs that are impacted, 30 of them have fewer than 10 students currently enrolled in those programs. And so as you think about that on a yearly basis, assuming that you're going to graduate in 4 years, that's an average of less than 2.5 students per year enrolled in those degrees. And we're not even talking about the number of students that would graduate out of that. 80% of those programs that are in my report have 15 or fewer students that are currently enrolled. On average, less than 4 students per year. So as difficult as my recommendations, the provost recommendations are, for me personally, for the provost, for the board, for our institution, for our community, one of the things that I want to emphasize is wasn't the decision already made in terms of what we're talking about today in programs by the students? The students that are here at Missouri Western, those whose fee dollars are precious, that they're paying for areas that they believe. Now, I don't want to take away the value from any other program or anything that we're talking about potentially phasing out, because I truly do believe that there are values in all of those programs. If you look at the list, for whatever reason, everything that is within the fabric of my being happens to be on that list. So I apologize to anyone who's impacted, but I'm a product of a political science degree. That's on the list. I absolutely love political science. It has been a springboard for me in my career, but it's one of the things that's on the list. And it absolutely breaks my heart, not only personally, but the fact that I know that there are great professors that are in that program that are moving forward. What I do know, though, is that the students here in this area have chosen not to pursue a degree in political science. We can either play the status quo and do nothing and continue to subsidize it, but we don't have that luxury to subsidize it anymore. We have to do something about that. Another one of the things that's near and dear to my heart is history. I've got another degree in Asian studies. Asian studies is history-based. There's also an art element to that as well. That's another program that's being phased out. The music and the arts. My grandmother was a phenomenal painter. My son and my daughter are making their livings, or they will, in the area of music and the arts. These are all things that have great value. And my heart goes out to our community, the faculty, the staff, the students, and the alums who are products of these. But the reality is that our students have selected the programs that we need to focus our strengths on. We need to put our limited resources into these programs to attract and to retain students. So as we talk about this, there's some questions. One is, do we really need to align our expenses with our revenue? Well, the facts and the realities of the student selection, that's confirmed. From an accreditation standpoint, you heard the numbers and the ratios that the accreditors look at to determine whether or not we are sustainable, whether or not we should have our accreditation. I will tell you, based on my past experience with another institution, as well as the conversations that we had this past week, the accreditors look at, do you have a plan to extract yourself from a state of financial distress? Do you have a plan? Is it a short-term plan? Is it a medium-term plan? Is it a long-term plan? And if you have a plan that is solid, one that makes sense, that you're able to extract yourself from that situation in short order, the accreditors are likely to watch you, but not to warn you or to pull your accreditation. With our ratios, this is what we need to be concerned about, because if we did nothing, if we stuck with the status quo, we will have major issues with our accreditors, and the talk will be completely different next time around. And so as we talk about a drastic measure and we talk about the elimination of programs, it's something that I take incredibly serious. This is something that I've never been faced with in my professional career. It's something that I didn't anticipate. It's something that rips my heart out, but for the benefit of the institution, to make sure that it's strong so that it can survive, we need to make changes. The countermeasures that we have put into place so far are working, but we need more time. We also need more levers. And we've considered the other measures as well. And there are many cons that are associated with those. And I hope that even with COVID-19, that we don't have to use those other measures. But we're at a point right now where we need to align our revenue with our expenses, align our enrollments, which have dropped, and we need to make sure that we've got enough to cover that. So do we slow down? What will that accomplish? We'll be further behind. Donations. What do we do on the donation side? I wish as we had released this report and we had 76 positions that the Academic Review Board had said, we need to reduce those. We need to eliminate those programs. I wish somebody would have stepped up with millions of dollars to say, hey, let's save this. We got petitions. Well, I appreciate the petitions. We read the petitions. We agree with those things. These programs have value. The reality, though, is without resources, we can't pay the bills and we can't support these under-enrolled programs. I haven't had anybody come forward and say, I'll give you $10,000 if you'll keep that program going. I haven't had anybody step up and say, I'll give you $5,000 or even $1,000. That's the reality that we're in. Does that mean that those programs aren't valued? No, it just means that we need to do something different. As we move forward, unfortunately, we need to chop some branches off of our tree. Why? To keep the tree alive and to keep it strong. As we go forward, we need to put some controls into place so that we are pruning those branches. It would be my proposal to the board as we go forward that we set up a system where when there's a new program that is proposed and comes forward, that it comes to the board for approval. And that the board asks the questions that, let's look at the economics of this. Is it going to be able to attract students? Is it going to be able to pay for itself and to have a renewal review process going forward? It's something that we need to be doing to make sure that that tree becomes strong. So as we move forward, I have several recommendations that I have listed. And those recommendations are incredibly difficult. There are things that I have thought about for months. Things that I've fretted about. Things that we've consulted about. As we have taken the ball and we have looked at it from all angles, this has not been a pleasant exercise for me, for Daryl Morrison, for Doug Davenport, for Sarah Cravens, for anybody who was on that Finance Advisory Council, anyone who is on that Academic Review Board, anyone here at the university. This has not been a pleasant discussion, but it's one that's necessary. It's one that will strengthen us to go forward. And as we move, there are several that I need approval from the board, and there are several that are not. One is that I am recommending that my senior leadership team pick up even more jobs. To them, I apologize. Same time, I am most grateful for them and their willingness to do that. But out of my senior leadership team and administration, I'm planning on cutting or adjusting at least $600,000 in salaries and benefits. And I know for those that will be impacted, it will impact them and their families and their livelihoods. And to that, I apologize, but it's a necessary adjustment and alignment. We've asked athletics to cut at least, or to make an adjustment of at least $500,000, and we'll continue to ask them to do more as they look to generate additional revenue and to move forward. There's been a lot of talk about lacrosse. So let me address lacrosse for a second. For those who criticize the decision to bring women's lacrosse into Missouri Western, we can provide you with the figures. Today, we could stop. It's not a pet project. It's not something that never even played lacrosse, haven't watched lacrosse. But I can tell you that it's attracting top students and student athletes to our campus who would have never have given Missouri Western even a shot. And as we look at building a program with 30 or more student athletes who tend to graduate at double the rate, the retention rate is higher, they bring revenue onto our campus, not to mention the spirit and the impact and the effect that we often don't see. As you talk about women's lacrosse, you talk about attracting 30 students in. It's Division II. We don't have a lot of scholarships that we would give. Give maybe 3 scholarships to that. That means you have 27 young ladies who are coming onto our campus who otherwise would have gone to expensive liberal arts schools, but they Missouri Western is a great place to get a wonderful education, a quality education in many different areas. And they'll come in and not only pay our tuition, but they'll live in our residence halls and they'll pay our dorms, and they will help us. And so as I've engaged with conversations with folks, I've said, we can stop women's lacrosse, but then I'm going to have to find $200,000 in additional cuts that involve faculty and administrators or staff. I don't want to do that. That's why we bring these programs in. You have those programs done in a fiscally responsible manner that will bring in revenue that are enabling us to do other things. Esports is the exact same thing. But my second recommendation is an adjustment at least $500,000. Athletics did over $400,000 this last year for us. I'm confident that they can do even more. My third recommendation is the one that I'm going to need a board motion for, so I'm going to skip over that. But I want to just direct people's attention to recommendation number 4, where we have new majors that are responsive to the workplace. We have our faculty that stepped up and they put together a Bachelor of Applied Arts in Performing and Cinematic Arts. This was not part of the Academic Review Board's review because it was a degree that did not exist, but that has gone through the university machinery. It's gone through the state. It has been approved. And so we are intent on moving forward with this in the fall. We also have in place a BS in law that is approving state, it's pending state approval at this point in time. We will be only the 3rd or the 4th university in the nation that will have this type of a degree. We'll be able to offer this without any new faculty. One of the great things about this campus is we've got programming that relates to the law, very strong, all across campus. If you bring it together and you put it in a package, it's going to be something that's attractive. We have our math faculty that have talked about an applied mathematics degree with an emphasis on data analysis. We're excited and encouraged by their creativity that came through this process in terms of a new degree. We also have had a minor in esports management and a BS recreation management with a concentration in esports management that have received approval from the state in April of 2020 as well. We're encouraged to be on the cutting edge, and we have a minor in earth and environmental science as well. As we go forward, it's not about cut. It's about being strategic and attracting students into these programs. And I will tell you that any of these programs, if we don't see the enrollments and we don't see the graduations, these programs need to close. That's the way that we need to be doing things. It's great to try new things. In fact, if you try new things and they don't work, well, great. At least you tried. At least you tried. Take the shot. Take the swing. And if it doesn't work out, where we reboot and we start again. And I do want to say, many of the things that we're facing today as we talk about the why, and I'm moving forward, many of these things are predicated on the fact that somebody had the courage to take the shot, they took it, and it missed. Well, we shouldn't fault them for that. We should applaud them for taking the shot, but now we need to pivot and we need to move on and we need to figure out a different strategy. That's where we need to be. And in my recommendation number 5, I have a host of things that the provost has recommended that I would encourage our faculty and provost to work together on that will help reduce barriers, will help our students. It will help make Missouri Western even more attractive. And even more significantly than that, it will help our students acquire their degrees. That's what we need to focus on, student retention and helping our students acquire their degrees. The more barriers, the unlikely it is they're going to finish. But we're here not only as an open access institution, but we should be here as an institution that facilitates graduation. And I strongly encourage everyone as an educator to go ahead and do that. So my third recommendation, and the one that I want to present to the board with a heavy heart, is that we align our revenues and expenses by suspending admission into certain programs, majors, concentrations, and minors, and even more heartbreaking than that, that we make some adjustments that will bring our staffing levels into line with our current student enrollments. As advised by the Academic Review Board, based on data, and advised by the provost in consultation with our campus community. Originally, the proposal is that we would have a teach out period over the course of 2 years. I would like to propose that we do a teach out program over the course of 3 years. That will be done in conjunction with various partner institutions around the state of Missouri. Part of what we need in higher education today is more collaboration, because we're all in the same boat, where we're all struggling. We're all at the point where we can't be everything to everyone. We need to pitch to our strengths. And so our partners and our other institutions that are out there, we have many universities that have stepped up and said, we are willing to help you teach out your students and to help. And so I would suggest that we do that over 3 years. That will protect our freshman class, those who came to us that are just getting done with their first year, and congratulations to them as well. That will protect them, and that will enable them to move forward. And I can tell you that our advisors in the Office of Academic Affairs have put together a teach out plan for these students, and we'll be reaching out and talking to each one of the students that will be impacted and affected. It's that personal touch and making sure that they get their degree is exactly what we need. I also believe that regular reviews are absolutely vital so that this does not happen again. We need to make sure that we're doing that. And then I want to highlight, before I get into any questions, some adjustments that we made after the listening period. The Academic Review Board, based on objective data, suggested that 76 faculty lines, not all of them are filled, so we're not talking about personnel and personnel only. There's some that are open lines, but they suggested that we eliminate 76 faculty lines. Through the listening process and by making a $600,000 plus adjustment to the senior leadership team budget, we have been able to potentially save some of the faculty lines that we will be recommending to the board. We also have tried to be creative. We have some administrative needs, some initiatives that we need to be covered, by asking some of our faculty to step into those and to do double duty, to teach and to fulfill those roles. I anticipate going forward here at the university that we'll see a lot of that as we talk about positions that we'll be asking people to double, if not triple, so that we can serve our students. And I know our community can do that. But after the listening period, in consultation with the provost, I want to recommend that we put 2 chemistry degrees back on the table. One would be a redesigned BS in chemistry that streamlines the degrees, reduce costs, and can be offered within the proposed staffing levels. And then a chemistry degree in medical laboratory science / med tech. Also, to keep the health information management degree, that can be done entirely online. In light of what's going on in the world of COVID and the fact that it is just about graduating the state minimum, we believe that not only is that sustainable, but that's an area that we can grow. A Bachelor of Music degree, one that can be redesigned, that will fit in nicely with a number of the art programs that we're looking to keep, as well as communication, convergent journalism. We would like to propose that the secondary education program here at Missouri Western be redesigned. Instead of having it be scattered into each one of the respective departments, that it be consolidated and brought into the Department of Education, and that the Education Department go out and create a BSc in secondary education that will be housed there. We want to make sure that we have not only our wide array of existing education programs in early childhood and elementary and special ed and middle school, but also on the secondary side as well. And we believe that the way to do it. And for minors, we want to keep the technical communication minor as well as the art history minor, and challenge the departments within the staffing that we'll be talking about to see if that minor can be redesigned, or that staffing can be made so that we have a plan in place to continue some of these minors. I believe that we can schedule courses on a 2-year grid so that the students understand when they come in when something is going to be offered. And we can make sure that we're not overlapping in courses, that we're not offering just more sections, but we're being much more strategic and smart about how we schedule. And so in my report, on page 15 of my report, you'll notice a table that lists the new proposed programs. That second part of the table are the suggested revisions to the provost's initial recommendations that I have just talked about. And then starting on page 16, going program by program, degree by degree, minor by minor, concentration by concentration, graduate certificate by graduate certificate, based on the quality work done by the academic review board, done by the provost, and in consultation with others, I would recommend that we maintain those programs that are listed, phase out those that are listed, and redesign others that are so designated. At that point in time, I want to pause, take any questions before I share additional thoughts and closing my remarks. Any questions that the board might have?
Matt, can you just, I know you've told us before, but tell us about how many students will be affected by these program adjustments or phase outs?
Yeah, so I mean, in terms of the number of students that we have that are impacted by the phase outs. So if I exclude the about 91 students that are graduating this spring and this summer, that gets me down to about 519 students that are potentially impacted. Now, they will be impacted in terms of the teach out. As we talk about phasing out programs and as we go into executive session to discuss personnel matters, which is appropriate under Missouri Sunshine laws, we'll talk about specific positions and the numbers. We're just talking about programs right here. But the way that this would work is our faculty are on year-to-year contracts. The proposal would be that those that are not tenured will not receive a renewal of their contracts at the end of the summer. Those that are tenured will receive a 1-year terminal contract, so they would have their contract through the middle of next year. And so the tenured folks who would still be here will continue to teach those classes. We will work with our partners and others to offer those classes, but we'll have 519 that before my suggested recommendations would have been impacted. If we add back in, let me see if I've got it for you. If we add back in health information management, an additional biology line chemistry, convergent journalism, the music degree. If we contemplate the BAA in cinema that we talked about and the folks that are currently in the theater cinema shifting into that degree, and if we look at applied mathematics, that would provide pathways, or I guess maintain pathways for an additional 197 students. So at that point in time, we're down at probably 322 students that are impacted by this. You know, with the 3-year teach out, I anticipate that we will pick up some other students we want to give students who are currently here on our campus at Missouri Western the opportunity that if they intended to declare one of those majors, but they hadn't completed the paperwork, that they would have the opportunity to do that, since we will have teach out tracks. So that number could go up. We want to give them until the end of May, potentially, to go and to make that declaration that's there. But really what we're looking at for those that we know of that have declared or intended to declare, and we know that, is about 319. And within that, there are a number of other students who may be in one of the concentrations in biology, for instance, that we still have the expertise. There'll still be related classes. It just won't be that specialization, that concentration, that they would be able to shift over into those degrees, and that would save even more students. There's probably another 100 that we would pick up there.
Thank you. And I guess another question, I know I've asked you this before privately, but so the public knows it's been asked. As we continue on and move to a stronger position as a university, there's absolutely no reason why some of these programs that are being phased out now due to low student enrollment, there's no reason why in the future, if there's high demand, that they could be added back in.
Yeah, and that would be the thing is, here we have the low enrolled courses, and we just do not have the students that are in the classroom to support the expenses. And it's just not the expense of a professor. It's, what it costs to keep the utilities on, what it costs to market that program, what it costs to make sure that the students are getting their transcripts. There's so many costs that go into educating a student that, I'll give you an example. We've got one professor that's teaching 3 classes this semester, and there are 12 students total enrolled in those classes, 12. That just does not make sense when you don't have enough students that are in your classroom to go ahead and do that. But times change, things can be redesigned. You can have innovative approaches that are there. Maybe as we come out of COVID-19, there are different areas of emphasis that, as the new economy emerges, those are things that we need to offer. And maybe it relates to something that is in the phase out track that you might put back on. Nothing really is set in stone along those lines. We just need to be pitching to our strengths with our limited resources. We have somebody who steps forward after listening to this, who has $5 million, who wants to come and talk to me about preserving a program. My email address is president@missouriwestern.edu. I will send you my cell phone and I'll come over and we can have a chat. It really is. We're doing this as a last resort measure to strengthen the university, with the understanding that nothing is ever permanent. We need to be innovating. We need to be changing. We need to make sure that we are responding to the marketplace.
President Wilson, I have a question. So this exercise that the Academic Review Board did seems to be a necessity going forward. Has this institution ever had anything like this done that you're aware of in the last 10 years? Have we done anything like this where we went through? And if so, when was it? I'm just curious.
Do you want to step? I'll get Doug to step up since I'm still the newbie here, but
because then I'm asking the next question is, so then what's the ongoing procedures, so that we stay on top of it clearly?
Absolutely.
So if you went back 25 years, the state of Missouri, through the Department of Higher Education, required a 5-year program review process that was intended to identify where programs are strong, where they're weak, where then perhaps they need to be discontinued. However, that was generally an exercise in asking for more resources as opposed to a way to determine a program should be eliminated. However, the state of Missouri in 2011 went through a statewide process whereby they sent to us a list of all the programs in their list of inventoried programs and said, these are the ones that are graduating below the threshold, which is 10 students on average over a 3-year period, right? And those reviews were done. And then there was another one done in 2017.
Okay.
Same thing. The state sent us a list. However, what that really involved was an opportunity to say, well, we should keep these programs even though they're below the threshold based on set of factors. And we made that argument to those to the state with regard to those individual programs. So for instance, you could say, well, this program is central to the mission. And well, that can be defined pretty broadly. And of course, we could argue, well, all the things we do are central to the mission. Many of the programs were identified as such in those reviews. And the other thing that would often happen is you would say, well, we're going to head in the right direction, so we need an opportunity to revisit this so this program gets an additional lease on life. So, and then you would say, well, we're going to present a recruiting plan, for instance, in order to get the numbers up. Yes.
Okay. So going forward with respect to, so that was directed by the state.
That's correct.
So going forward internally with respect to just our own review of what we're doing and how we're doing it and how are they performing, is that just going to be an ongoing?
You know, it has to be an ongoing process. And we've been talking about whether we do that on a 2-year cycle or whether we do that on a 3-year cycle.
Okay.
It's something that, as you heard, has not been done here.
Right. That's why I'm trying to get my head around the frequency in which you'll do it so that we don't let this, we stay on top of it, basically.
It does. And it would be my, strong preference, that the faculty within that department and in other departments, I mean, they're evaluating each other, and you have a core group that rotates where, you're looking at the enrollments, looking at the graduations, and then you're looking at the subjective, and you're talking to folks in the workforce, and you're seeing what other programs are out there and really going through this comprehensive process. And within that, just not letting the data die. I mean, oftentimes you have the data. At that point in time, it's like, okay, so why do we not have students that are graduating? Right. I mean, there's a program that I was looking at that has, 30 something students in it, but they're graduating, 2 per year. And I'm like, well, that question needs to be asked, right? I mean, why do you have 38 students that are declared majors, but you only have 2 that are coming out? Well, we've got to figure out something to do better. We talk about retention, but what exactly does that mean? I think really digging down into those programs to figure out what can we do better, how we can do better, because any institution, including Missouri Western, I mean, the new world really is, every faculty needs to be a recruiter. Every faculty member needs to be doing retention, and that applies to staff as well. We need to be having the conversations. They need to be data-based. We need to have the analysis. So we'll set up a schedule that'll be either on a 2 or a 3-year track. I think with where we are right now, my recommendation would be a 2-year track where, we're just not letting this slip. And then of course, now that we've got all the metrics and we've got this set up, that, your Office of Academic Affairs, I mean, they're looking at the data constantly to try and see if there's any warning signs, but having a more in-depth comprehensive review every other year.
Okay, good.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thanks.
I guess I would also say,
Sorry, Al.
thanks to VP Morrison's presentation, now we know what the CFI is, negative 3.3. Was that correct? What I wrote down?
Yeah.
So they're going to want a plan from us, correct?
They are. They're going to want a plan. I have already provided my report to our accreditors with the understanding that the board is meeting today. And I have been requested to report back to our accreditor after this meeting. And so we will be in constant communication. I think typically those conversations are between the provost and the accreditor. And so
okay.
Doug now has a new best friend. Right, Doug? and those aren't my words. Those are the accreditor's words. So I think Al had a question.
I do not have a question, but I'd like to make a few comments if I could. You know, we as board members, I mentioned earlier that, you know, I've been on the board for 1 year. When I started, I thought I was only going to attend less than 2 handfuls of meetings throughout the year. Well, certain things changed that course of action. You know, I've had 2 employers in my lifetime, the United States Army and Herzog, and on March 15th of this year, I finished 48 years at Herzog. I've had people raise the question that I hope you are not a rubber stamp board. Well, a lot of you, because I think there's over 200 of you watching us deal with the issues we are. And as I look at you, I think most of you that know me know there's no rubber on my stamp. And I'm going to say this. I think I believe I can totally appreciate my colleagues being the same way in that regard. But back to Herzog, there was a point in time when we called it Black Saturday that literally I went home to my wife who was pregnant with our first child because we didn't think we were going to survive. We are in a similar situation here. And, you know, our problems here aren't like wine. They don't get better by age. I'll be very candid with you. As we look at projections, and Daryl put a deal up here, next big question mark. Unfortunately, in a lot of respects, things get worse. That could mean we could have a round 2. Well, I hope and pray I'm totally wrong. So as we look at it, and when it comes time to the vote, you know, all of you, and I want to go back and say, you know, all of us as board members, we received a letter from Professor Breck. We appreciate that. We got an email from Professor Church. By the way, Professor, I'm assuming you're on this line. I appreciate the fact you put your phone number. Be careful who you give numbers to. They do call you at some point in time. And I had the opportunity to have a conversation. The interesting thing about 9 times out of 10, if there's a real problem, communication is 90%. And in some respects, the more we communicate, the better we get. As I look at you, in fact, I'm just going to say, when the motion is made, and I may make it, I'm going to vote yes for what we're talking about. That does not mean that we are setting anything in concrete. What we're dealing with here is not static, it's dynamic. So immediately tomorrow, if there's changes, and it's been touched on, that need to be made in any way, I make a commitment to you. Again, I think on behalf of my board members, that's what we're here for, and that's what we're going to do. So with that said, you've heard it from me. By the way, you go back to phone numbers. Betsy's got my phone number. Anytime you need it, I'd be happy to talk to you. Thank you.
Thank you, Al. Anybody else have any questions?
I'd like to, I know, just so it is all out there, I kind of piggybacking a bit on what's been said collectively, but certainly what Governor Landis just said of President Wilson is available to everyone in the process and has taken on all comers, not just ones that want to tell him how great he's doing, but the ones that want to complain about, you know, sins 3 generations before you were born type of thing, and has taken all that on. I talk to Matt daily, come and visit him, sit out here and go through these things, and have tasked him and other senior administration with Herculean tasks. I mean, tasks that cannot be done, and yet they still continue to try. It is to me a reassuring, tangible thing to see these programs that are being added back in, programs that are being redefined because faculty has collaborated. And I would challenge faculty to continue to do that. I mean, if we can come up with ways to cobble programs back together that are limited in their cost impacts, but if they are that valuable to the students and the community, let's work together on trying to put those things back together. Dr. Davenport also helped educate me on, some of the process that as lay people, we are not educators. Well, Kayla's an educator. We are not higher education educators with that. We are not bureaucrats. We don't understand those things. We just try to educate ourselves and try to ask the best questions that we're able to, and we just do the best we can. But we are certainly fallible through this and every other process as well. But I have appreciated the information, and there's a lot of misinformation out there of what this, what direction Missouri Western State University is going. And we are not becoming a trade school. I mean, we are an applied learning school, and we want to be adaptable to the workforce needs of industry and the community and the state and the region and the world as a whole. But this concept that has been reinforced to me, we are still teaching English. We are still teaching history. We are still teaching in so many of these areas that it would be fantastic if we had 20 students graduating in each of those classes. And just as President Wilson has said, there's programs on there that I have degrees in. There's a program on there my child has a degree in, whose ink is hardly even dry on the diploma, but that is, these are not pet projects, or they are not things that we want to kick around just because we don't like. We love that type of stuff. So I would challenge the faculty to keep working with administration to come up with, I'd love to see this list get longer, of degrees that we can redesign with that. Things that I didn't understand within the general studies degree of having 2 minors within that, and you would still have a minor within a program. So you would have a baccalaureate degree with 2 minors in programs that maybe we don't offer the major in, but still things that prospective employers may be looking for in that. And I would hope the community, almost everyone in the community should know someone in here, should know someone who knows someone with that. And I hope that we have the confidence and continue to instill that, and we will work tirelessly to continue try and rebuild that. But the task has been given. I talked to Matt over and over about it. Are there any stones that we haven't turned over? Anything else we can do? And the constant reassurance of, yes, we've turned them all over 10 times, but if you want them turned over 12 times, we'll do them 12 times. We kept looking and looking, and these were the things that where we finally got to after doing all this innovative stuff. And so there is a lot of behind the scenes things that we have seen these reports, have looked through these, and most of this stuff is available to the public. And we all welcome the discussion if you educate yourself and look through this and talk to us about it. But I would continue to encourage everyone to work forward. I hope that just emotion of people saying that I will no longer support the university, or I am no longer proud. That's not how families work. It's not how people who really care about something work. We can be frustrated. We are all frustrated. These are not the conversations and meetings we want to have. We wish we were handing out diplomas at graduation on Spratt Field, is where or Craig Field at Spratt Stadium, where we wished we were at. We wished we were doing those types of things, but this is what has to be done to make sure that this university is here for future generations, to make sure it doesn't just survive, but that it thrives. And so I appreciate the education that we have been continued to receive from administration. And page 15 is what gives me confidence, reassures my confidence we're on the right path. Those are things that a month ago we're not anticipating seeing on there. And for that gives me a lot of confidence going forward.
I would like to say something too. Lee did say a lot of what I was thinking and wanted to say. I am from the education field. I feel like I have a lot invested in this university, having graduated from here myself, and 4 of my 5 children. Everyone has their masters, and 2 went on into the medical field. So Missouri Western served us very well. Now I'm in the education field, and one of those very majors that I graduated from Missouri Western is gone. And the reason is there's no need for it now. You don't have to have a college degree to get the position that I was wanting. So I went back and I got my special education K through 12. June 30th, I will be retiring from secondary education. And having served my time in secondary education, I see where some of the professors that have talked about their concerns of losing their degrees, their BSs in history, their BS in English. I see their concern, but I also understand working in it that those students don't want to go, just as these professors have stated, and take those extra courses that are required to receive that degree. Now, and I have talked with President Wilson and with Debbie about my concern for the secondary education. And I'm pleased and so excited that we will have a secondary education degree. You can have the emphasis in the area you want, in your history, in your English. Those classes will still be there as electives. And that's what we want everyone to understand. Even in your area of criminology, we still have criminology. I had people say, how can they do away with this? We're number 2 in the state. Yes, we are. We still have criminal justice degrees. We may not have juvenile criminology or corrections criminology, but we do have criminal justice. We still do have good departments in every area. And I'm excited that we do have the secondary education. I thank you for including that. And same way with our chemistries, our biologies, we still have those areas, people. You need to just look. And if it's under the board members, this is there, look at it, see what we have. I encourage you to do that.
I'd like a couple comments. First, I want to thank Sarah. I know you're working extremely hard. Doug, I know you've worked extremely hard. Daryl, I want to thank you seriously for providing me information just like that when I was asking for it. Apologize if I was bothering you too much. And then finally, I just want to make a comment that it's very clear to me that higher education today is not what a higher education looked like 5, 10 years ago, 20 years ago. And I think the key word here is being nimble. And I think you have to have vision and you have to be nimble to survive in this environment. Because I think other places of education without the leadership, and I'm thanking you finally for your leadership and your innovative way of thinking, because it is about surviving and coming out better and being stronger. But being nimble and being able to do it is key. And some places won't be as nimble, and I don't believe that they will survive. So thank you all for your hard work. I know everybody's just really worked hard, and you too, Betsy. Thank you. So.
Yeah. Kayla mentioned, criminal justice. Well, Brigadier General Mason is a Missouri Western grad from the criminal justice program. So I'm a grad from Missouri Western. It was State College back then. It was 1979, so you can figure out how old I am. Very old. Yes, always appreciate everything that our administration does, President Wilson. I know how hard everyone has worked on this. And as I said before, it's nothing that any of you signed up for. These are very hard choices and very difficult choices, and even very heartbreaking. But I believe it's a decision that's going to position this university for a successful future for our students and our community. And any business that's going to be successful has to learn to adapt and change or be left behind. And that's all I want to say. So if anybody else wants to ask any questions or make any comments, if you're ready for the vote, I will ask for a motion to approve the president's strategic recommendations regarding academic program phase outs, redesigns, combinations, and initiations.
So moved.
Thank you. Who did that?
Rick.
Thank you, Governor Eberstall. Is there a second?
Second.
Second, Governor Landis? Okay. Is everybody ready for the question then? Would you like to do a roll call or you just want to do an aye? Let's do a roll call. Betsy?
Governor Smith.
Yes.
Now you're gonna have to give me a minute because I'm gonna have to write down everybody's names with your votes.
Sorry.
I wasn't prepared for this, so give me a second.
I have to give you something good to do.
That's right. Keep me on my toes, don't you? Governor Teeman,
Aye.
Governor Landis,
Aye.
Governor Schoonover.
Aye.
I'm sorry, Schoonover.
Aye.
Governor Leckie.
Aye.
Governor Ebersold.
Aye.
Governor Mason.
Aye.
I guess I should change mine from yes to aye. Sorry.
That's everybody. I see a vote of 7-0.
Motion passes. Thank you.
Do you mind if I just offer a few additional comments?
Yes, please.
So, you know, as we as we have all collectively gone through this exercise and the vote has been taken, you know, I was reflecting on what we were doing and three different things just popped into mind. So I'll keep it briefer than my remarks. You know, one is, as everybody knows, I mean, Japan is a huge part of me and my family. And we absolutely love Japan, family there and the like. And Japan has taught me a lot, and I appreciate that. But one of the things that I was thinking about, there's a word in Japanese called sumimasen. And sumimasen is, it's in effect an apology, but it goes deeper than that. Sumimasen shows respect for others. Sumimasen shows that you're mindful of their situation. And sumimasen, in addition to being an apology, is even an expression of appreciation. So when I think about respecting others, mindfulness of the situation, and even an expression of appreciation, I just want to offer a sumimasen to everybody who by this phasing out of programs. To the faculty, to the staff, and to the students, sumimasen. Sumimasen also to those who have found it necessary to publicly attack members of my team who are only here trying to help the institution. Sumimasen, remember, respect for others, mindfulness of their situation, and expressive appreciation to my wife and family for what they have had to endure over the past several months. And sumimasen to anybody who potentially out there I may have offended. But as we talked about, we really are at a crossroads. And I reassure you that while this decision is something that is being forced upon us, it can also be a point of opportunity if we do it with an open mind. And I think you've heard that from the board members. This is an opportunity for improvement. As difficult as this might be, it allows us to focus on our strengths, to look for ways to attract students, to pause and remember why we're here, students, to find ways to help them graduate, to look for ways to eliminate obstacles that are preventing them from doing that. We still have a lot of work ahead of us. There's COVID-19 that we have to deal with. We've made a lot of progress, but going forward, I am confident that our community can maintain our confidence become more efficient and focused, can continue to provide a quality education, and continue to be innovative, pragmatic, and cost conscious. But as we move forward into the future, it's going to take all of us to do it. The board can't do it alone. The administration certainly can't do it alone. The faculty and the staff can't do it alone. It really is going to be a community effort. So as we go forward, we have an exceptional foundation with a great team of people who truly care about this institution. And I hope that we can focus on accessibility and innovation. I hope that we can focus on service and readiness. I hope that we can be flexible with our students. I hope that we can look around the world and draw upon different things. I hope that we can strive for financial efficiency through a different lens. I hope that that can be a modern lens, something that's innovative. And I hope that we can focus on the success of our family. We're an open access institution with a statewide applied learning mission. We're an invaluable resource, and we need to be that going forward. So, Chair Smith, that concludes my report.
Okay, thank you. I also want to let the community members and faculty members, I'm sure anybody in higher ed knows, but maybe the general public doesn't know. Governor Wilson had, like I said, he emails us on a regular basis and keeps us informed and up to date. And just to let everybody know, this is happening all across the nation in higher ed. This is not just Missouri Western State University having struggles. There are universities from one coast to the other that have experienced financial issues. We get emails on University of Missouri cut 12 programs, I think in 2018. University of Wisconsin, Whitewater, 2020, University of New Hampshire, Long Island University, Western Illinois, Marquette. I don't know that they've all cut programs, many of them have, but this has been going on for the last 2 years. Actually, President Wilson, University of Akron plans to cut academic and athletic programs. But what we want to do is avoid the absolute worst case scenario that we've read about. Concordia, it was a 115-year-old institution, closed its doors overnight in February. So anyway, we're going to get through this and be stronger and better than ever before, and that's the purpose. Any other business? Board. The only thing would like to make some board appointments to the nominations committee. I would like to appoint Governor Schoonover and Governor Landis to the nominating committee, and they will be tasked with submitting the slate of officers at our regularly scheduled meeting on June 25th. If you would accept, I'd appreciate it. And I'd like to appoint, or actually reappoint, Governor Landis to the Innovation Stockyard Board, because he was appointed last year and has done a fabulous job. And I think it's good to just maintain the consistency there. The last appointment that the chair would make at this time is to the Foundation Board. And I would suggest that I would let the next board chair appoint that person. Currently it's Governor Tiemann serving on that foundation board. So that's the only thing that I have. The next scheduled board meeting will be a special board meeting on Thursday, May 28th, 1:30 p.m. And then our regularly scheduled meeting will be on Thursday, June 25th at 1:30 p.m. We need to have a motion next to close the meeting. President Wilson, how long of a break do you want between when Rick and Greg and myself sign off and re-sign back into closed?
Yeah, so we need a motion to go into executive session.
Right.
Probably need 15 or 20 minutes.
Okay, so I would need a motion that we would close the meeting for discussion of, oh, I'm sorry, I'll just read it right off here. Vote will be held to close the meeting pursuant to Missouri Statute 610.021, Sections 2, 3, and 14, to consider real estate, personnel, and other matters protected by law. So I would need a motion.
So moved.
Thank you, Kayla. In a second.
Greg Mason, second.
Thank you, Greg. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? So we'll move to a closed meeting. And when we return to close, besides President